am Megann Marcellino, and I want to welcome you back to Generations at the Table. Thank you so much for spending some time with me today. We've been talking about, in the last couple episodes, the art of letting go. We've talked about letting go of anger and resentment. We've talked about letting go of anxiety and worry. And all of this is so that we can take those negative things, those negative emotions that are in our hands and in our hearts and our minds, release them and embrace the good things and the great things that God has for us. You know, I think that when we talk about today, I want to talk about letting go of fear so that we can embrace faith. And at first, when I started my study on this, I was like, well, what's really the difference between what we talked about? I think it was last week when we talked about anxiety and worry. And so what I've really come to see with it is that anxiety and worry are things that we kind of consistently struggle with. Maybe it's just like I talked about fear with my children, or something that I'm like rehashing, and it kind of creates this place of anxiousness in my heart. It's perpetual. But fear is often sometimes something that we are just faced with. There's like an impulse moment. It hits us maybe out of nowhere. And I think it's those moments that define us, because it's like, what do we run to? Who do we run to? What do we call out? And so Psalms 34:4 says, I sought the Lord and he heard me and delivered me from all my fears. So that's where we're going to lay the baseline today, is that we are seeking the Lord together so that we can be delivered from all of our fears. Because, you know, sometimes fear is logical, right? I struggle with a fear of spiders and a fear of snakes. I hate those things. And I'm always worried that the kids are going to be out in the yard and they're going to encounter one. And it's like a thing. And that, I guess, maybe falls more under anxiety, but it's a logical fear. Snakes and spiders can be dangerous, but I have to choose to put my trust in the Lord, because the word says that he delivers us from all of our fears. When I think about fear, I was dwelling on it. I'm like, well, where are moments where I've allowed fear to come into my heart? And see, I think it's where we realize that we open the doors to fear, and that is kind of what gives birth to anxiety and worry. But we allow this moment and this feeling. I think about a near miss of a car accident where you think you hit the brakes, and that moment of like that panic. When I was little, I was probably maybe in the second grade. I clearly remember my mom was driving from Leavenworth, Washington to Kashmir Valley, where I was going to school. I was in the second grade, and we hit black ice. And I don't remember if it was on the way to or from school, but I remember being in her car and us just spinning on the highway around and around and around. And then we just came to a stop. It, like, the force of the spinning just like pushed me into the back of this, or into this, to my seat. I remember that moment. That's fear to me. I remember a time Paul and I were flying home, and we landed in Tulsa, and we were driving back, and I was on the phone with my parents letting them know that we were here. And all of a sudden I saw a car just like flying through the air, rotating and coming down like on the hood, on the top of the car. And I just yelled out, "Oh, Jesus." And my mom said I just hung up the phone, and they panicked because they didn't know what had happened. Paul and I pulled over, and the car is like smoking. We're the first ones there. The car is smoking, and Paul just goes on a full-on bolt. And he opens the door of the car and pulls the driver, who is completely like knocked out of the car, and trying to get him away from like all of this smoke. And I was just screaming, "Paul, stop, Paul, stop, Paul, stop," because I was afraid that the car was going to explode. And I was choosing my husband over this strange man who we just saw fly through the air. And so we waited for the police to arrive. But that is a moment where I say, yeah, I had fear. That was not anxiety. That was panic. And his adrenaline kicked in, and he did the right thing. And I was just like, back up, like self-preservation. And so those are the moments. I think about the delivery room with my children where I had moments where fear came and I couldn't stop shaking and crying. I think about demonic encounters, or, you know, maybe something less, like a really turbulent flight where you're having that moment and you're just feeling concerned. These are just brief, intense moments. But again, in those moments, who do you call out to? Where do you run? Like, what is your point of refuge? Do you call out the name of Jesus, or do you like swear under your breath? I mean, I was so glad that I called out for Jesus in that moment, because I was afraid when I saw that car flying through the air. And then how do we pray? Do you immediately begin decreeing the word and what the word says over the situation? Or maybe you begin praying in the spirit. But remember, God has given us a creative force with our words. And so in those moments, no matter how intense, what comes out of us? And I can tell you, what comes out of us is what we've put in. What have we fed? If we have fed ourselves nothing but doom scrolling and social media and, secular media, more than likely what's going to come out of you is fear and cursing and word curses and just not what you want. But if you've put in yourself the word, and if you've put in yourself worship in that moment, before you can think, even at a subconscious level, you are going to turn to the Father and you are going to cry out to him. These are the moments that our stomachs drop and our palms sweat and our lungs tighten and it restricts you. I mean, have you had that moment where it's like, you feel like you can't breathe? I've had those dreams. I hate those dreams, but I've had those dreams where I'm falling and I feel like I can't get out a scream. It's just like nothing. It's silent. I guess that's more of a nightmare. But I've also had it where it's like, less fear, but a different way where I'm approaching a microphone. I'm getting ready to speak in front of a crowd and I feel that anxiety start like in my palms and my chest may get blotchy, or it's like my body reacts to that emotion of me feeling like I'm not enough or I'm going to mess it up. Those are fears. The feelings are so much the opposite, though, of what the Lord has for us. He does not want to restrict our breathing. He breathed life into us. He does not want us to feel fear. He wants us to feel like we can operate from a place of trust and faith in him. He offers us peace. He offers us security. He offers us trust and the very life itself, again, that he breathed into us. Because fear is rooted in basically a fear of death, which we see came in the garden. It's Genesis 3:10. After the fall of humanity, when Adam said, I heard your voice speaking to God in the garden, and I was afraid because I was naked, and so I hid myself. So that first confession of fear was because mankind had sinned, and they were afraid of God, afraid of consequence, afraid of punishment. I imagine that fear was also wrapped in shame. And so it's like shame and fear, they feed off one another. But the word says in 2 Timothy, for God has not given you a spirit of fear, but of power and of love and a sound mind. So when we encounter those moments where it's a quick impact moment of fear, we have to say, this is not of the Lord. I'm going to operate from a place of love, a place of God empowerment, where God has empowered me to succeed, and a place of a sound mind. And a sound mind is a mind that is at peace. A sound mind is a mind that has been reflecting on and meditating on the word of God. So again, I'm going to remind you that in those moments, what comes out of you is what you've been putting in. So we will all encounter those moments. There will be more of them in our life. But if we want to approach those from a spiritual place and a place of like biblical principle, we have to stay in the word and we have to stay in worship. I mean, I love music of all kinds. I love listening to artists. I love like the artistry behind it, great songwriting, lyrics. I love it. But I have to tell you, in the last probably, 5 or 10 years, I very rarely listen to secular music anymore. And I don't have anything against it. I'm not saying you shouldn't. I just feel like in those moments, if I can fill myself with something, I would rather it not be someone's lovesick story. I would rather it be worship unto the Lord. And again, there's nothing wrong with, listening to secular music and enjoying concerts. I'm not criticizing that. For me, it's like if I only have a moment to fill my heart. And I think I became more sensitive to it as I became a parent. Even having Arabella in the car as an infant, all of a sudden I was like, they said what? They said this, they did that. And I just realized that it was planting these little tiny seeds into her heart and mind, even though she couldn't understand and comprehend. And I began wanting to protect her from that. And then it was like, well, what about protecting my own heart, my own mind? It's interesting what becoming a parent does to you. So these are all the negative aspects of fear, but we're going to let go of fear. Today, we're talking about letting go of fear so that we can embrace faith. We're not just letting it go so that we are empty. Now we want to be able to pick up something better. And so I think from fear, it can come from irrational things. It can come from past experiences. It can come from trauma, but it's ultimately rooted a lot of times in the unknown. Like, what will happen? What will it be like if I do this? Or if this happens to me? But then I ask you on the flip side, what will happen if you don't? I was faced with a situation last year and from a professional level, and I was scared to make a decision. I needed to make a hard decision, and I was afraid. I was afraid of what it meant for our organization. I was afraid to lead in decisiveness. But the question that just kept like weighing on my heart was, what if I don't? What if I don't have the guts to make the hard call? And when you're in a place of leadership, whether it's in your career or in ministry or in church or your family, you have to make hard calls sometimes. And you can't let fear dictate those and speak so loudly that you're making bad decisions. You have to fall back on wisdom. And so what I kept falling back on was, well, what if I don't? What if I don't make the hard call? Then what? And it was like the fear of basically inaction was more than the fear of taking action. I don't know if that means like I was more afraid of not doing something than doing the right thing. And I just had to say, okay, I'm going to jump out and I'm going to do it. Isaiah 41:10 says, fear not, for I am with you. Be not dismayed, for I am your God, and I will strengthen you. Yes, I will help you. I will uphold you with my righteous right hand. Do you believe that? I had to ask myself, do I believe that? Do I believe that he is with me? Which means he is with me in this situation that is hard. He is with me in a situation I did not expect. I have found myself in unknown waters. I have found myself in a valley, but he is with me. Do you believe that? That knowledge, that belief, that is what I fall back on in those moments. And I choose to not be dismayed because the word says, be not dismayed. So I have a choice in this. I may feel dismayed, but I can choose, no, I am not going to be dismayed. I am going to choose God. I am going to choose his strength over my own, and that he can help me through this. When we let go of fear, we open our hearts and our lives to grow in faith. And I think it's important that we remember that our spiritual life is a journey. Where you are today is not going to be where you are tomorrow. And hopefully who you were 5 years ago is not exactly who you are now. You have this opportunity to evolve and grow and become a different person. You know, Paul and I got married young. I was 21, I think, when we got married. And I'm so grateful for that opportunity. And I know I know that's not everybody's story. But for me, I'm not the same person that I was when we got married. We've been through so many hard things since then, so many good things. I just had a birthday and we sat around a table with some friends and family, and they blessed me with their words. And they told me what some of their favorite memories were, but then also what they had seen in my life. And what I was grateful for is that they've been there through so many of those things, and they've been there through all the phases, and they've allowed me to grow. And I hope that I've allowed them to grow and to change, and that we can recognize that we are growing and changing together. And your spiritual walk should be an advancement towards unlocking your kingdom destiny. And you should not remain in the same place. And you should certainly not be falling behind. When we embrace faith, Hebrews 11 says, now faith is the substance of things hoped for the evidence of things not seen. We have a confident assurance in our Father, in faith in him, in God's character, in his ways, in his words, and his promises, in spite of what we see around us. But it is embracing faith that allows us to truly overcome fear. You can't just say, I'm going to turn the fear off. You have to embrace something else and say, I'm going to replace that with this, which is ultimately my trust in you, Father, that you have my good at heart, that you have the best thing for my life in mind, that you are positioning me, that you are aligning me, that you know my future and you have a hope for me. Like, do you believe that? And if you're struggling to believe that, I would encourage you to find a few scriptures that speak about your future and begin decreeing those scriptures over yourself daily out loud. Maybe you just do it for a few weeks, but tell your heart and your soul and your mind to come into alignment that this is what the word says. This is what the word says about you. This is what the Father says about you. We need to regularly cultivate our faith. You can't just put your faith on the back burner. If all you feed your heart and your mind is the news or social media or phone calls with friends or FaceTime, and you don't make time for the word, and you don't make time for worship, and you don't make time to be in a good like Christian community where you're feeding your faith and feeding your relationships. You know, I think our relationships around us, my dad always says that your friends, the people that you surround yourself with, will basically give you a glimpse of your future. And so if you surround yourself with people who struggle constantly with doubt and fear and lack, scarcity, I'm not saying you have to drop them, but you have to realize that you are going to be emulating that in your own life. So you need to choose to spend your time with people who help build your faith and help take you to where you want to go. Hopefully they're one step ahead of you in your journey, and it gives you something to strive towards. A faith lifestyle, it is matched with actions that give birth to peace. The word says in James 2:17 that faith by itself that does not have works, that does not have actions, is dead. So just a mere confession, there's not a lot of power in that. It is good to start by stating and decreeing, but it has to be walked out. So when I asked you earlier, well, what happens if you do and what happens if you don't? Those are both actions. Choosing not to do something is still a choice. Choosing to do something perhaps is a better choice. But at the end of the day, faith is action. And so you're either going to walk out fear with inaction, or you're going to walk out faith with moving into that next thing that God has for you. Faith doesn't always make sense. It's not always logical, not always practical, and it's certainly not always easy. And I think sometimes we look for places of grace where we feel good, where we feel at home, where we feel comfortable. We seek that's what's familiar. But sometimes faith is a huge leap, and it feels like you're leaping into an unknown chasm. It's not always like that, but I've definitely gone through seasons where it's like, I'm going to jump, but I don't see where I'm going to land. I don't see how you're going to catch me, but I'm giving you my yes. And my yes is hard, and my yes is painful, but I know that the reward of obedience far outweighs sacrifice. And I always want to meet God with my yes, but yes is faith backed with action. If your faith is rooted in truth, in what the Word says and what the Father says, if it's biblically founded, if that's where your faith rests in, and it's not of yourself, not striving, that is what begins to unlock your kingdom destiny. We talk about this year about walking through the double doors of destiny. I can tell you that there is no way that we will walk through the double doors of destiny from a place of fear. Nobody walks into the unknown from a place of fear. We have to walk into it from a place of faith. But remember, I want to challenge you with this. I want to remind you that it is false to assume that people who walk through their doors of destiny, people who achieve great things, giants of the faith, people who make, cultural differences, political differences, community differences, family differences, whatever it is, that they did so because they conquered fear completely. No, they just met fear and they chose faith. They came to face with those decisions and they said, I see you, I hear you, it may seem logical, it may seem practical, but I am choosing faith. Because courage is not necessarily the absence of fear. It is just moving ahead in spite of. It is taking that next step. It is refusing to be inactive. Most successful people still face fear in their life. It's not something that they've completely overcome, but they do not let it make them inactive. They continue to press towards the goal of their calling. They continue to press towards unlocking kingdom destinies, advancing the kingdom, as we say at Kurt Landry Ministries. Successful people embrace faith over fear. They embrace the work and the actions that it takes to get where they want to go, and they choose to be overcomers. And that is something that we have to choose to overcome daily. So just because you have a moment of fear does not mean you failed. It is just something that has to be faced, sought after, and overcome so that we can walk in faith. The choice is always ours. We can retreat. We can fall back. We can be like Lot's wife and look behind us. We can stop. We can pause. We can be paralyzed in fear, or we can walk forward one baby step at a time. I hope that today that you are choosing faith over fear, that you are choosing to get free, that you are choosing to embrace the kingdom destiny that He has for you. Next week, we're going to talk more about letting go. We're going to talk about letting go of past mistakes and regrets and embracing forgiveness and hope for our future. I hope you'll join me.